Welcome back to the show today. We are talking about the job of NBA coaches. Why are coaches seemingly constantly being fired and then hired in the NBA? I feel like a team hires a coach, but in reality, they're really just doing a trial shift. Like, congratulations, you're the next coach of our team. But in 1 year, if we're not where we plan on being, we're firing you. Or if the players don't like your vibe. Or if the front office thinks you dress like a dork. The real irony of the situation, though, is the coaches don't really care. Well, of course they care some. No one likes being fired. No one likes being told they're not good enough. But there is a nice little consolation prize for them at the end. Because NBA player contracts and coaching contracts are the same. They're guaranteed. Meaning they get to keep all the money from their contract even if they're fired 1 year in. Let's take the example of Mike Budenholzer, who was just fired from the Phoenix Suns. Mike's contract was for $50 million over 5 years. So Mike got paid his $10 million this year. But he's also owed $10 million every year from now until 2029. That is, unless of course another team offers him a coaching contract and he wants the job. In that case, he'd have to be bought out by the Phoenix Suns. After all, a head coach can't be under contract for 2 different NBA teams at the same time. But a team can have 2 different head coaches under contract at the same time, which now is the situation that the Suns find themselves in. Because the Suns just fired a coach after signing them to a $5 million deal last year. In 2023, just the summer before Mike Budenholzer was hired, they hired Frank Vogel. He signed a 5-year, $31 million deal. They fired him after only 1 season. You're not having deja vu. These are 2 different men that got hired for the same length of time and got fired after the same amount of time. But they could force Frank Vogel to come back and coach next year. They could say, hey, you want the rest of that $31 million? You got to come back and coach the Phoenix Suns again. Personally, I kind of think that's what's going to happen. So when it happens, you'll know I'm smart. So a really interesting trend I've seen in the NBA is coaches being fired pretty soon after winning a championship. Most recently, Coach Mike Malone in Denver, who was their most winning coach in franchise history and brought the team its first title. The Nuggets fired him less than 2 years after winning the finals. They also fired Malone with less than a week left in the regular season. And the Nuggets were the 5th seed in the West too. So I don't feel like they were bad or they were on a really gnarly losing streak. And something I was thinking is, why would Josh Kroenke, the governor of the team, fire Malone? Why would he blame him for the team? Malone and the Nuggets would be in a better position if Kroenke had spent money on the team. Guys like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Bruce Brown were very important parts to that championship team. But Josh Kroenke didn't offer them enough money to stay in Denver. He didn't want to pay luxury tax. He's cheap. Those guys left and they signed contracts with teams that knew their value and had cap space. So it does seem unfair that the governor of the team would blame Mike Malone for the team itself. Because in reality, it's kind of his own fault. Well, not exactly. I'm actually going to stand up for the owner for a second. When a team wins a championship, egos get inflated. And sometimes there's not enough room for those egos in the building. Apparently, general manager Calvin Booth and Mike Malone were regularly fighting over personnel. Booth didn't want Westbrook playing as much as he's playing. He wanted Malone to play the younger guys that he had drafted, like Peyton Watson. Booth had gone as far to hire his own assistant coach. If you didn't know, coaches are generally in charge of their own coaching staff. So Booth coming in and hiring his own guy was not cool. I think Josh Kroenke was really just tired of all this drama. So he fired both Mike Malone and Calvin Booth, the general manager. The tension between both guys was poisoning the whole organization. He actually said he'd been thinking about doing it earlier. He was just waiting for the right time. And it's not like Jokic was particularly butthurt about the firing either.
I mean, definitely change. Like I said, I mean, if you want to change something, that's how we do it. You know, the owner wanted to do it, so it happens.
That leads me to my next point. A lot of times coaches get fired because they lose the locker room. The players get tired of their bullshit. After Mike Malone was fired, some post-game interviews resurfaced where he was being very critical of the team.
I don't know what our guys are thinking, and I challenge them to look at the standings, look at our remaining schedule, and if we continue to play the way we're playing, we will be in the play-in tournament.
Generally, I remember Mike Malone being very supportive of his team, but things changed, man. And I can understand why Jokic didn't shed a tear when Mike Malone was let go. Mike Brown was another coach that was fired this year, and he had won Coach of the Year less than 2 years before. He'd also coached the Kings out of a 16-year playoff drought, but he lost the locker room and the team turned on him. Again, the telltale of a bad vibe is a hypercritical post-game interview.
There shouldn't have been a closeout to any. There shouldn't have been a closeout to any three-point shooter.
I don't know who was in the right and who was in the wrong there. I don't even remember the game. But De'Aaron Fox had to be like, dude, what the was that? The Kings players all seemed very excited to have Doug Christie as the interim head coach. The main sentiment coming out of the locker room is he let them play their game. DeRozan, Fox, Sabonis all had quotes on how happy they were with Doug Christie. They even had a 6-game winning streak after they fired Coach Mike Brown. It doesn't really matter what you've done. Once the vibe turns sour in the locker room, it's over, man. If people aren't enjoying their jobs and they don't want to come to work, you gotta make a change. Receiving the NBA Coach of the Year award has become the kiss of death. Dwayne Casey won the award in 2018 with the Toronto Raptors. But he was fired 2 days after getting the award. He actually gave his acceptance speech after he'd been canned. Why would the Raptors front office do this? You have the best coach in the league. Why would you fire them and take your chances on someone else? Well, the answer is the Raptors didn't want a good coach. They wanted a championship. Dwayne Casey was the best coach that they'd ever had. Before Casey had got to the Raptors, they were trash. Casey changed the culture of the Raptors, and he got them to the playoffs 5 times in a row. But unfortunately, that wasn't good enough, because Dwayne Casey would lose to LeBron James seemingly every year in the playoffs. They lost to the Cavs in 2016 in the Eastern Conference Finals, and they got swept by LeBron and the Cavs in 2017 and 2018, giving the city of Toronto the pejorative nickname of LeBronto. So I understand why Masai Ujiri, the president of the Toronto Raptors, fired Casey. I probably think that Casey understood too. Casey made the Raptors relevant, but that was as far as he could really take them. So Masai ends up promoting assistant coach Nick Nurse, who'd been there since 2013, and he knew the team. Also, he had had success as a head coach in the G League and in Europe. And then the following year, Nick Nurse and the Toronto Raptors won the championship. But to be fair, swapping Dwayne Casey for Nick Nurse was not the only change that they made. They also swapped out DeMar DeRozan for Kawhi Leonard. Danny Green was also in that trade, and then they added Marc Gasol at the trade deadline. So I do think Masai gave Dwayne Casey a real opportunity to win with the Raptors. I see him as a very important part of the Toronto Raptors organization and getting them to that point. I don't see him as a head coach that's cursed to being above average and never more than that. I don't know if anyone really does, but I definitely don't. Now, what makes a coach a good fit for a team? Well, if you have a lot of experienced vets on your team, you need an experienced coach. Actually, scratch that. You need a coach with some serious accomplishments. The NBA is full of egos. It can be very hard to control a group of guys whose billboards are all over town. This is what Adrian Griffin experienced in 2023. He was hired by the Bucks in June and then fired in January of 2024. He didn't even get a full year. The irony is Giannis is the one who wanted to hire Adrian Griffin. He was the team's choice, but here's the team dancing after he was fired. The Bucks were also second in the East. The team was good. He was going to be the All-Star Game head coach. The Bucks team just didn't like Adrian Griffin. He didn't spark confidence within them. They didn't believe he knew what he was doing. So they fired him and they brought in the exact opposite. They brought in Doc Rivers, who actually ended up having a worse record than Adrian Griffin did. And he's still their head coach. So it really wasn't about the success of the team. The Bucks needed a daddy to feel safe. They needed someone who they thought knew the job. The irony is you had a coach who clearly crashed out and got ejected from a game just to show Giannis that he supported him, to a coach who's willing to deflect all responsibility and pass all the blame onto the team.
You guys forget what we're running. Then we miss the shot and then nobody gets back. That tells you all you need to know about where our heads were. We had some guys here and we had some guys in Cabo.
I think Doc is a good coach for the Bucks because he has a big ego. He thinks really highly of himself, so if you try to walk all over him, he'll clap back without hesitation. The Bucks team won't respect any coach who's grateful to have the job. Occasionally you'll see a head coach butt heads with a vet who doesn't want a dad. Before Kenny Atkinson was winning head coach of the year with the Cavs, I'm assuming he's gonna win, he was coaching the Brooklyn Nets. Then Kyrie and KD came along. Kenny Atkinson was starting Jarrett Allen at the center position. KD and Kyrie wanted their boy DeAndre Jordan to start at the center position. Kenny said no, so he got fired only a few weeks into the season and they hired Steve Nash. I wonder what that team would have been if they would have kept Kenny Atkinson and not listened to KD and Kyrie. I think having a self-assured coach who's backed by the organization is the most important part of an NBA team. A lot of people think it's about the star players, a lot of people think it's about how deep the bench goes, a lot of people think it's about the draft picks, but I really admire organizations like the Heat and the Clippers. Erik Spoelstra hasn't won a championship in 12 years. Ty Lue has been with the Clippers since 2020 and he has not won a championship. Spo and Ty Lue make $15 million a year. They're both the third highest paid coach in the NBA because they're good coaches and their organizations don't use them as a scapegoat when they don't meet expectations. The easiest move to make for a front office is to fire the head coach because the coach's salary isn't factored into the salary cap and usually their contract isn't very expensive. You fire a head coach and it feels like you're making a big move, which you are, but it might not be the move that needs to be made. For instance, the Suns shouldn't have fired Mike Budenholzer. He is not the problem with that team. The problem is the roster. It's the draft assets. It's the luxury tax. It doesn't matter what coach they hire next. Those problems will still be there. So an organization can try to change its perceived value by hiring a new coach every year or trading for an all-star, or it can do it the slow, hard way and try to put together a competent team that eventually wins games. All right, thank you for being here. Leave a recommendation. I'm doing a lot of recommendations now. Like the video. People have liked the video and the channel is doing really well. So be good to your mom. I forgot to say something. There is now a podcast. That's what I forgot. There's a Patreon. There's a pinned comment to the Patreon below. It's $2 a month and you get a weekly podcast. So $2 podcast every week, every Saturday is the plan. I've recorded this 7 times. This is the last time. I don't remember. Oh, I replied to all the comments. Be good to your mom. Eat a corn dog.